pitching features to broadcast media.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast, the only podcast giving you actionable skills and advice you need to execute a strategic PR program. Warning: what you hear next may lead to brand awareness and increased sales and customer exposure. Now here's your host, Rinjini Joshua.
Hi, and welcome to episode 117. Today, we're going to talk about pitching features to broadcast media, which is a little bit different than pitching. Well, it's a lot different, let me be honest, than pitching your regular print journalist or online journalist. Pitching broadcast is a ton of follow-up. If you imagine some of the TV shows that you see with broadcast journalists, like chasing down stories, they are in and out of the office. So one of the biggest challenges is catching them, getting in front of the right people, and making sure that your story is even seen before you can get considered to even be published. So some of the dynamics are really different than just writing a pitch, following up, and trying to get that online print journalist to respond. That's trouble in itself. But when you have a local approach, it makes it a lot easier. So if you are pitching your local news station, for example, then you're going to definitely want to lean in on why it makes it important to the regional location of the station. And so I think it's important to find out what exactly you want them to do. Do you want them to interview you? Do you want them to tell your story? And then also, what is the call to action? What do you want the people watching that segment to do? Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to buy? Do you want them to visit something? Do you want them to try something? So make sure you have those things buttoned up before you approach any broadcast media. First thing I would do is identify which local shows you want to be on. In Los Angeles, it's usually KTLA 5, Fox, ABC 2, maybe Telemundo or Univision. If you have a Spanish speaking, a story related to Spanish speaking audience. So identify those stations. And then you want to go for the producers. So the producer is the right person to contact. The contact information is usually on their team page. So again, a lot of people just don't realize like all this information is so accessible online. If you go to the website and go to their news editorial page, it'll give you some email addresses and the producers. If you're not finding the producers, because oftentimes you find the on-air personalities, but maybe not the producers, type in KTLA 5 morning news producer, but you have to know which show you want to be on. Is it the morning news, afternoon news? Is it some other kind of special show on the news? So you have to know the show because each producer produces their own particular segment. And so without being specific, you won't find the right producer. Oftentimes you'll find them on LinkedIn somewhere. So that could be a good way to find the right producer. If you have Sales Navigator, you might be able to find their email address, or you might be able to assume their email address. So this is one little hack that we do sometimes is that we go and we find the email address of, let's say, the host, because they do have email addresses public on like their websites. So you go find the email address of somebody else or a host or a personality or whatever. And then you just copy the nomenclature of that. So if it's first name dot last name at fox11.com, then it's likely that if you find the producer's name, it's going to be first name dot last name at fox11.com. So just copy that. And I'm sure if you've done any kind of business development, you've done this trick before because sometimes it is hard to find email addresses. Then what you want to do is create a media alert about your event, your activation, or your news. So a media alert is like kind of like a short version of a press release. It's something that you'll just put in an email. You'll have a headline, of course. That headline needs to be why this news is important. And then the details of location, time, date, if there is such details. So there's a couple of reasons why I've reached out to local media. One reason is that we've had a local event. One, I'm just going to give random examples, but we worked with a 3D printing company. We did this event at a local museum, And it was like a kids event, and they did some 3D printing, and we donated 3D printers to that science museum. And so we put that together, and there was an event that was like kicking that program off. And so we basically gave them the time, the date, location, and had local broadcast show up to that event. Another one was we worked with Red Vines to launch their a new kind of, it wasn't a flavor pack. It wasn't even a new flavor. It was all the reds and pinks, I think. But it was like it was all the different styles of licorice in one pack. It was the California Red Vines campaign. They went up and down California, and they took this cool like branded van, and they gave away like California Red Vines bits, which is like all these different styles. So there was like a rope, a twist, a nugget or something like that. I forget what they're called. But the van stopped by, was going to be in Los Angeles for a couple days. And so we had the van stop by the radio station, and they did a segment, the TV station, and KTLA 5 did a segment on the Red Vines California tour. But for that one, we didn't have a date or a time. We basically just said, hey, our bus is passing through the city. Can we stop by the station? Can we arrange that? So there is still some kind of urgency and time set. So typically, when it comes to broadcast, for the most part, you're going to want something that's a little like that's very timely and urgent. That they have to cover it in a certain amount of time, because that's what the news is. The news is stuff that's happening in the day, in that time period. So remember that about the news. It's very localized. Now, every once in a while, they do like special segments, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, holiday gift guides, and you could probably get your product into those segments as well. If you're keeping an eye on local press, I would just reach out to them a month before that holiday and see who's doing that segment. And then they might point you in the right direction to be able to send the product. Now, you do have to be available to send those products right away if you want to be in those TV segments. So Valentine's Day is coming up. I would reach out now and say, hey, are you guys doing a Valentine's Day segment on things you can do for Valentine's Day? I have a great idea. Here it is. So again, it has to be timely and urgent. And then for events or things like that, so for an actual event that has a time, date, and place, you want to send that media alert about 3 to 4 days in advance and no earlier, because the newsroom does not plan the news stories that much earlier than that. And they're even going to have you follow up. So the first step in that process is that you send that media alert or whatever information to the news desk, and they'll give you the right email address for the news desk. If you actually call the news desk phone number, someone picks up all the time. That's where people give the news hot tips. So they pick up that phone number and they'll say, hey, send your announcement or media alert or whatever to this email address. So you get that email address. Then you send it to them. So there are lots of changes of hands in the news desk. What typically happens is they grab your story, they put it in a file of like yes, no, maybe, and then you need to follow up. It is your job to get that story. It is not their job to keep up with what you have going on. So I typically send the media. Well, I call them first, just strategically. I say, hey, this is happening. And they'll say, send the information. So then I know that I've actually prepped them. Then I send the information. Then I follow up the next day and say, hey, I sent this yesterday. I wanted to know if you're going to be able to cover it on the day that we need you to cover it. Then they'll say, oh, it's in this pile. And then they'll say either, yes, we're covering it. If it's a really good story, they'll probably have, commit to it right away. But if they're not sure and they have a lot of stuff going on, then they'll say, call us back the morning of. Now, when it says call us back the morning of, they're talking about the morning, like 3, 4, 5 a.m. So these guys come into the radio station very early in the morning, prepare their shows. They usually have some kind of production meeting at like 4 a.m. and then another production meeting around 9 or 10 a.m. And so that's when they pick their stories of what they're going to be doing. So you're going to have to be waking up a little bit earlier if you really want your story to get pushed. And I've done this where I've even called like hourly at one point to see if we were going to get on. And They would even tell me at 4 o'clock in the morning, well, we're going to have our meeting at 9, call us back. And then you call back. And the thing is, you keep calling to stay top of mind. So they know that you're available to facilitate that particular story. And so sometimes they're not going to choose you over something else that's happening in the call. But I mean, sorry, and that's happening in the news. But if you're on top of it, you have a higher chance of getting on their rotation. And then once that happens, you have to give them a contact number, have an on-site person, and they'll tell you what to do after that. So again, following up early in the morning is really important. And then I wouldn't be afraid. I mean, the last thing is really don't be afraid to call back until they tell you no. They lose track all the time. They don't mind. I've talked to so many different people in the newsroom, and they're very open to just getting those phone calls. So, and it's really easy. It's so much easier, I feel like, than sometimes calling a journalist what you're cold pitching a story to, because these guys are looking for news. They're looking for stuff all the time. So make sure that it's timely, relevant, and urgent. Make sure it's actually news or interesting. It could be human interest. It could be news that's happening, and it could be an event. And so make sure you have all these elements lined up. So this is all for local and regional broadcast opportunities. Sorry, yeah, local and regional broadcast opportunities. When we're looking at national opportunities, that's a little bit more like traditional pitching, but there are some things that you need to keep in mind. You want to make sure that when you're pitching the most national show that we typically pitch is Fox News, because they are national and they have affiliates all over the country. It's actually a great station to pitch because you could get syndicated in other markets. So Fox News has Morning Brew, and they have like a ton of micro shows, micro news shows. And so you, again, know which show you want to target, find a producer for that specific show, and really cater it. Go to the About That Show page and cater your pitch around how it fits to what that show reports. I hope this doesn't sound convoluted, but yeah, like take your idea and really craft it around what their mission and vision is, and how does your story drop into that mission and vision of theirs. And that really helps the producer say yes much quicker, because it's like, oh yeah, this is what we talk about on our show, of course it fits into this. And you can even say, I saw your shows about this, and this is how it fits in, and this is why your audience would like it. We'd really love you to interview our executive or our CEO. So once you get a bite from them, be ready to go fast. This is where a lot of people fail. Once you get a bite, you need to move with a quickness. So I always say line this stuff up beforehand. Know your executive schedule. Know that he's going to be able to be on Zoom, on video, or that he might be able to be in studio. So if he's going to New York and you want to set up a meeting in person, have these details already ironed out. You want to be able to answer those questions fast to the reporter. Those are questions that you should be knowing as someone who's handling any kind of pitching. Is you should have the answer to those questions prepared and ready to go. What am I going to do if this person answers? Oh, well, yes, we can do Zoom, or we can show up at your studio. What would you like? So at this point, it's like catering to that person, that producer, sorry, because they don't really have a lot of time and their attention span is very small. So you want to respond in a quick manner with efficient and good information, have a press kit ready, have the bio and headshot ready, have talking points ready. So when you're pitching broadcast, you really have to be much more on alert and prepared, because if they do respond, when they do respond, then you're going to have to take fast action. So I hope this helps a little bit when you're pitching features to broadcast media. I really love pitching broadcast media. It's really fun, especially if you have a really good dynamic speaker, because it's very possible that they could, one, syndicate that segment across all their markets. So like ABC, Fox, NBC, MSNBC, well, NBC and MSNBC is the same thing. But all those channels can syndicate to other markets if that story is relevant and good enough. And if the speaker is relevant and good enough. So make sure that your speaker is prepared, that he's not going to get deer in the headlights look. I've had that happen before. And even then, there is a recovery. If your story is really good, they might ask you to come back. So just prepare yourself. It's all about being prepared and then also knowing who to reach out to. So good luck in your endeavors. You can always reach me at Ranjini at thesilvertelegram.com if you ever have any questions. Or you want to run your pitch by me or your idea by me. I'm happy to go through it at no charge. So hope you guys have a great day and talk to you next time.